Welcome back to ILTV News. We open with a difficult story. A pregnant Israeli woman was shot and killed by a terrorist gunman last night in Samaria while en route to the hospital to give birth. The newborn was delivered before the mother's death and is currently in stable condition. ILTV's Steve Witkoff has been following the developments.
Tzila Gez, age 30, succumbed to her wounds at Rabin Medical Center in Petach Tikva after doctors performed an emergency C-section to deliver her newborn baby, who was then transferred to Schneider Children's Hospital located in the same complex. Doctors say the infant is in serious but stable condition. Her husband, Hananel, who was driving the car when it was attacked, was lightly wounded and was released from hospital. The couple left 3 children at home. The terrorist was in a car when he opened fire on passing Israeli vehicles in northern Samaria near the community of Bruchin, where the family lives. The IDF launched a manhunt for the terrorist who fired at several vehicles on Route 446. Troops in an Air Force drone were deployed and have encircled and blocked entrances to the adjacent Palestinian town of Bruchin. Prime Minister Netanyahu said he was deeply shocked by the horrific terror attack. This abhorrent incident precisely reflects the difference between us, those who desire and bring life, and the reprehensible terrorists whose goal is to kill us and destroy life. There has been a surge in violence in Judea and Samaria since the October 7, 2023 attack from Gaza. Since that time, IDF anti-terror ops in the territories have arrested some 6,000 wanted men while killing hundreds of terrorist gunmen.
Well, as Israel is still reeling from this terrible attack, joining us to discuss the situation in Judea and Samaria is Lt Col Maurice Hirsch of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Maurice, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to have you on. Now, we've just heard about the fight against terror in Judea and Samaria. Thousands have been arrested already, yet attacks are still happening. What can Israel do to better prevent these kinds of attacks?
Well, I think there are a number of different operations that Israel can carry out, whether they be tactical or strategic. I think understanding really the motivating and driving factors behind the terrorism. It's Hamas. It's the prevalence of weapons that are available in every house in Judea and Samaria. It's the fact that the Palestinian Authority, despite having had tremendous training and financial assistance to build an effective anti-terrorism security apparatus, has really done nothing, and instead their terrorists are part of the fight against Israel. These are really tactical things that can be done and strategic options that must be put on the table to understand what's driving this terror forward, what's providing really the cover for the terrorists, why hasn't the Palestinian Authority stepped up as it should have done, and what Israel must do as a result of that.
Now, can you give us an overview of some of these terror groups operating in Judea and Samaria? What kinds of threats do they pose to Israeli civilians? And is this all part of the fight against Hamas, or is it even further beyond that, what we're facing in Judea and Samaria?
So in Judea and Samaria, we're still left, putting aside the October 7 massacre, we're still left with really the plethora of Palestinian terrorist organizations. It's Hamas, it's Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it's the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades of Fatah, it's the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and really all of these different organizations trying to carry out their mission of murdering Jews. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that on the ground every single day. These cells operate in a not in a sporadic way, but rather in a very coordinated, very clear way. They are funded both directly and indirectly via the axis of terror from Iran. They are provided with weapons. Every week or so we hear about the arms caches that have been seized, for example, trying to infiltrate Israel from Jordan. And that's only really the ones that we catch. What about all of those weapons that are basically flowing freely without being intercepted? That's what's fueling the terrorism. That's what's allowing the terrorism to continue on. And really the cover that they're provided by the Palestinian Authority.
Now, what is being done to stop some of this funding, the flow of weapons to terror groups in Judea and Samaria? You mentioned they're trying to get through that Jordanian border, specifically the Islamic Republic of Iran. What steps are being taken that you're aware of, at least, to stop this?
So I think we've seen, and really the IDF did report it probably about 4 months ago, the idea to set up an entirely new division that will focus solely on the Jordan Valley and prevent that porous border with Jordan from being used and abused by the terrorists as a means to smuggling weapons. We've seen this obviously in Gaza with the tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor, and we're seeing that the terrorists really are very creative in their thought patterns, how they can smuggle more and more weapons in to the terrorists in Judea and Samaria. And so that's something which the IDF has put really as one of its top priorities, creating this new unit that will be solely focused on that. The other operations that are being done, which I think are somewhat lacking in their aggressive approach, is stopping the flow of money. How is it that money is still flowing to these terrorists, that they're still receiving money? How is it that we're still allowing the Palestinian Authority to continue funding and really rewarding the terrorists for their terrorist activities? These are things which Israel needs to do. Rather than just fighting each individual terrorist on the ground, we need to develop a much more complex plan for cutting off terrorism at its legs, whether it be the flow of weapons or the flow of finances. And that's something which I think Israel is still somewhat lacking in its actions.
Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you about the role of the Palestinian Authority. I know you've done quite a bit of work on the pay-for-slay policy, in which the Palestinian Authority literally pays terrorists for their acts against Jewish civilians, Israeli civilians. What is the status of this deal, and why isn't the Palestinian Authority doing more to combat some of this terrorist activity in Judea and Samaria, where they do have relative control in comparison to Gaza, which is under Hamas control?
The answer is simple, Emily. It's because the Palestinian Authority does not necessarily disagree with Hamas, is interested in continuing on the fight against Israel. If you look at anything to do with the Palestinian Authority today, the media is awash with citations of 77 years and 78 years of the Nakba, the catastrophe that they call Israel's creation. The Palestinian Authority still denies Israel's right to exist, denies Israel's right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people, and they are the ones promoting terrorism. So you cannot expect them to promote terrorism wholeheartedly on the one hand, but at the same time fight the terrorism at the same time. They have common goals with Hamas. They might disagree as regards the exact timing of every terrorist attack, but their goals are the same, the destruction of Israel, and therefore our expectations of them should be really in alliance with what exactly their goals are.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Maurice Hirsch, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, former U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing back on claims that Israel is being sidelined during his high-stakes diplomatic tour of the Gulf, insisting that his initiatives are very good for Israel. Let's take a closer look at the latest from Trump's visit to the region.
Speaking in Riyadh after a series of closed-door meetings with Gulf leaders, Trump said that any future nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran must include a complete end to terror proxy support, and added that any return to negotiations would be conditional on the Islamic Republic of Iran halting its regional terror networks.
I want to make a deal with Iran. I want to do something if it's possible. But for that to happen, it must stop sponsoring terror, halt its bloody proxy wars, and permanently and verifiably cease its pursuit of nuclear weapons. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. I don't imagine there's anybody at this table or anybody in this room that would say they can. The sanctions that I just placed on Iran and
The statement came just hours after he met with leaders from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain, all signatories or potential partners to the Abraham Accords. Trump rejected media speculation that Israel was being ignored in these talks, emphasizing that his security discussions with Gulf states directly strengthens Israel's strategic position. He also took aim at the Biden administration's previous dealings with the Islamic Republic of Iran, calling them dangerously naive and warning that any agreement that doesn't neutralize Iran's regional terror machine is a threat to Israel and the entire free world. Yesterday, the Trump administration announced that Qatar will also be joining the negotiations with the Islamic regime in Iran, despite the fact that Qatar has assisted the regime in evading oil sanctions. Trump's next stops are expected to include meetings with Palestinian leaders following his $1.2 trillion business deal signed yesterday with Qatar, and his meeting with Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara, who was given a list of demands by Trump in exchange for the lifting of sanctions in Syria, a move Trump dubbed a fresh start. Trump's recent moves in the region, including the deal with Qatar, a $600 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, and a $225 million deal for weapons sales to Turkey, are all part of what he calls a new security and prosperity framework for the Middle East.
And joining us now to discuss these recent moves by President Donald Trump in the Middle East is Israel's Special Envoy for Innovation and one of the leading voices in Israel on the Abraham Accords, Fleur Hassan-Nahum. Fleur, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. What's your initial response to Trump's strong comments against the Islamic Republic at the GCC? And how does that jive with his recent announcement that Qatar will now be involved in those nuclear negotiations?
Well, Emily, thank you for having me. It's a mixed bag, as we have learned to expect from Trump sometimes. I'm very pleased that he's been unequivocal about the fact that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. I think he understands that fundamentally. He understands that it's a risk for his country and it's a risk for civilization. And even though they are at the same time negotiating, it seems, I think it's very clear that he will remain or has remained strong in his stance that there's no option but to ensure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon.
Now, yesterday we saw Trump sign a $1.2 trillion deal partnering with Qatar, a state that's actively supported Hamas for years and many other Islamist terror groups. They've bought American universities, companies, newspapers across the U.S. to advance really this Muslim Brotherhood agenda. Why is Trump expanding partnerships with Qatar?
That is really the mind boggles, especially when you see what he's doing with Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia has spent the last 20 years trying to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood in their country, the Wahhabis. Also, the Emirates have done the same. They are fundamentally against Qatar. They are fundamentally, and they speak openly about the fact that Qatar is sponsoring the Muslim Brotherhood and providing a voice for them with Al Jazeera. And so this is a lot that Trump is trying to juggle. He's trying to juggle, I guess, a constructive relationship with Qatar, whilst at the same time, a constructive relationship with Saudi, which is actually contradictory in many ways. So that is something which is boggling. I'm hoping that the fact that Saudi Arabia is the much larger country, the much bigger economy, is going to win in the end. That's what we're hoping. And we all know how Saudi Arabia feel about the Iranian regime.
Now, in Syria, we saw Trump making demands of Ahmed al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda terrorist, to join the Abraham Accords and also deport Palestinian and foreign terrorists who are currently in Syria. This would be, of course, in exchange for lifting sanctions on Syria. Is this something that you see Syria actually going for under al-Shara? And will that sanction relief threaten Israel's security?
Well, I think that the challenge here is how do you pull al-Shara away from the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS type, which is where he comes from, let's be honest. How do you pull him into the moderate Arab countries and away from the radical Arab countries of the region? And I think everybody's trying. Israel has managed to get rid of the immediate threat that's coming from Syria, destroyed all its whatever weapons of mass destruction they had left, taken over the other part of the Hermon to protect the Druze. And so I think that Israel has to play a smart diplomatic game of not saying no, but waiting and seeing what this man, if this man can actually deliver a country that wants a constructive relationship with the region and with Israel.
Right. Trust but verify. Now, all of these deals are being made so far without the involvement of Israel. Why is Trump attempting to push Israel out of the conversation, or is he?
Well, that's something that is as yet not clear. I want to believe that President Trump, as the person who opened up the Abraham Accords, wants to continue the wonderful work that he started. And in fact, he said that in front of the entire Saudi government. he said, we hope you join the Abraham Accords. We hope to expand the Abraham Accords. And this honestly is the biggest diplomatic success in the region in the last few decades. So I don't believe that Trump wants to abandon the idea of the Abraham Accords. He knows it's one of his big diplomatic successes. And I want to believe that he's not going to leave Israel out of that. What he's probably doing is worrying about the economic health of his country. And that, of course, comes first. And within his own cabinet, he has people who believe in the American first mantra, which is do what's best for your country and then look at everyone. There's other people who have more regional outlooks. The question is, who's going to win?
All right. Well, unfortunately, I think we are out of time, but I want to thank you for shedding some light on these multiple deals coming to the forefront, and we'll continue to keep you updated as our viewers tune in to ILTV. Thank you so much for joining us today, Israel's Special Envoy for Innovation, Fleur Hassan-Nahum.
Thanks, Ed.
And just before we continued, we'd like to share an exciting opportunity for our ILTV viewers in the New York area. ILTV, in partnership with Arutz Sheva and Besheva, is proud to take part in the Jerusalem Conference in New York, an inspiring evening of thought leadership and pro-Israel conversation with leading experts from Israel and beyond. The event will take place at the Fifth Avenue Synagogue, and we've got a special offer just for you. 100 tickets at 50% off exclusively for our ILTV viewers. Scan the QR code on your screen to learn more and to grab your spot now. Hostage and ceasefire talks have renewed in Doha, and a major push is underway in Doha by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff to forge a mediated agreement between Israel and Hamas. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly had a 2-hour call, but the U.S. envoy failed to extract a major concession from the Prime Minister. Witkoff is expected to ramp up pressure on the parties during the next 2 days, with reports that Hamas is showing flexibility on the issue of disarmament of the terror group as part of an agreement. The talks kicked off with renewed energy and optimism following Hamas's release of American-Israeli hostage Idan Alexander. According to officials in Jerusalem, Israel continues to insist that it rejects any proposal for a permanent end to the war that leaves Hamas in place. The talks are expected to continue at least until the completion of President Trump's Middle East trip tomorrow and through the weekend if progress is made. If no ceasefire is reached, Israel says it will launch a major Gaza offensive designed to defeat Hamas in Gaza. It's day 587 of the war in Gaza. Fresh Israeli airstrikes were carried out at the European hospital where the IDF targeted Hamas military leader Mohammed Sinwar. Sinwar's fate remains uncertain. The new strikes appear to be an attempt to prevent anyone from approaching the tunnel beneath the medical center where Sinwar was targeted. The IDF has yet to confirm that Sinwar was killed in the strike and whether other top Hamas officials were with him. Meanwhile, the IDF continues strikes on terror command centers. The army issued an evacuation warning for Palestinians in several schools and a hospital in Gaza City's Rimal neighborhood, saying that Hamas is exploiting the civilian sites for terror.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
Visiting German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and Israeli President Isaac Herzog visited Kibbutz Be'eri, where they laid a wreath in honor of the victims of the October 7th attack. The visit of the two presidents celebrated the people of Be'eri and their efforts to rebuild the kibbutz that was heavily damaged during the Hamas invasion. Visiting Israel to celebrate 60 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries, Steinmeier said Germany does not forget that there are still hostages held in Gaza and that the war and suffering is ongoing.
585 days after the massacre, there are still hostages in the hands of Hamas, including German companions. Their fate is an open wound. Germany will not forget them, and I will not forget them. Our voice will not remain silent as long as they have not returned. At the same time, today we hear in a very real way the detonations in Gaza, and we know innocent people are suffering there too, children are dying there too. Violence, terrorism and destruction must never have the last word. Our humanity must be stronger.
And now, are you interested in learning Hebrew? Have a look at eTeacher, an online and live course with the most established Hebrew language instruction institution. For more info on the Rosen School of Hebrew, please scan the QR code on your screen now.
Instead of being left out of another Hebrew conversation, learn Hebrew at the Rosen School of Hebrew and finally get in on the conversation. Only to learn it's about sports and be left out of it again. Whether for cultural enrichment, practical use, or academic interest, Rosen's online courses are the Goldilocks way to learn Hebrew, which means you will get taught by real-life attentive teachers. Yes, the living, breathing kind, unlike in any of those impersonal language apps. Yet, unlike an old-fashioned old pun, you won't have to schlep yourself to a physical classroom in order to meet them. Our sophisticated platform adapts to your needs, making study accessible and engaging. Being the world's most experienced online Hebrew school equates to over 20 years of perfecting our methods, with expert scholars who'll teach you by providing guidance, patience, and care. This is done in small classes through hand immersion and gesture techniques, meaning absolutely no English is required, contrary to the competitors. So come gain access to both the practical need for communication and the emotional desire for a deeper connection to Israel. Our program promises to equip you with the ability to speak, read, and write Hebrew fluently. Choose a standard or academic path to earn a certificate upon completion. Join the thousands of our successful graduates. Enroll today.
And now in Eurovision news. Tonight in Basel, Switzerland, Israeli Representative Yuval Raphael will take to the stage to perform in front of a massive audience in the second round of Eurovision semifinals. The annual EBU song extravaganza kicked off earlier this week with all participating countries rehearsing their act before participating in one of two semifinal rounds. Each country will perform in the semifinal to qualify for the final, set to take place on May 17th. If Raphael qualifies, well, she will join the 10 countries that qualified in the first round of semifinals in the finals event. Raphael is a survivor of Hamas's October 7th massacre, where she attended the Nova Music Festival. Raphael will take the stage with New Day Will Rise, a power ballad that suggests darkness will fade. Raphael is expected to face boos and protests from anti-Israel groups, but says she is 100% focused on the music. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 16 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 31 degrees Celsius or 88 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you so much for watching.